Have you ever wondered why you can solve complex problems at work, but can't stop the destructive patterns in your personal life? Why you can analyze everyone else's mistakes, but keep making the same ones yourself? Jung found that intelligence without self-awareness becomes a weapon pointed at your own heart. Before we dive deep into this dangerous truth that Jung uncovered about intelligent men and self-destruction, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more content about the fascinating world of psychology and the human psyche. If you're watching this video, chances are you recognize this pattern in yourself or someone you know. The brilliant executive who drinks himself to sleep every night, the gifted entrepreneur who sabotages every successful venture, the talented artist who destroys relationships the moment they become meaningful. These aren't isolated cases of weakness or moral failure. They're manifestations of what Jung identified as one of the most dangerous psychological patterns affecting intelligent men. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and he made a disturbing discovery about the relationship between intelligence and self-destruction. He found that the very cognitive abilities that make men successful in their professional lives often become the tools of their personal downfall. The analytical mind that can dissect complex problems becomes hyper-vigilant to flaws and failures. The strategic thinking that builds empires becomes the planning mechanism for elaborate forms of self-sabotage. But why does this happen? Why do intelligent men seem particularly prone to destroying the very things they've worked so hard to build? Jung's answer was both simple and terrifying, because intelligence without emotional integration creates a split in the psyche that demands resolution. Even if that resolution comes through destruction. Think about the last time you made a decision that you knew was bad for you. Maybe you stayed up all night scrolling through your phone when you had an important meeting the next day. Maybe you picked a fight with someone you love over something trivial. Maybe you procrastinated on a project until it became a crisis. In that moment, you probably knew exactly what you were doing and why it was harmful, yet you did it anyway. This is what Jung called the shadow in action. But for intelligent men, the shadow operates differently than it does for others. Your intelligence allows you to rationalize destructive behaviors with sophisticated justifications. You can create elaborate mental frameworks that make self-sabotage seem logical, even necessary. Jung observed that intelligent men often develop what he called a compensatory relationship with their own success. The more successful they become in external achievements, the more their unconscious mind seeks to balance this through failure and destruction. It's as if the psyche has an internal accounting system that refuses to let you get too far ahead without paying a price. This compensation doesn't happen randomly. It targets the areas where you feel most vulnerable, most human, most dependent on others. Your career might be bulletproof, but your relationships crumble. Your financial success might be undeniable, but your health deteriorates. Your intellectual achievements might be impressive, but your emotional life becomes a wasteland. The cruel irony is that your intelligence makes you acutely aware of these patterns while simultaneously preventing you from stopping them. You can see the destruction coming like a slow-motion car crash, but your analytical mind becomes paralyzed by its own complexity. You think your way into problems that simpler minds would never create. Jung discovered that this paralysis happens because intelligent men often mistake thinking for feeling, analysis for experience, understanding for wisdom. You become so skilled at intellectualizing your emotions that you lose touch with the raw, immediate feedback that emotions provide. Without this emotional guidance system, your intelligence becomes like a powerful car without brakes, capable of tremendous speed but unable to stop before hitting the wall. Consider how this plays out in relationships. An intelligent man can analyze his partner's needs, understand relationship dynamics, even predict potential problems with remarkable accuracy. But when it comes to actually being present, vulnerable, and emotionally available, his intelligence becomes a liability. He overthinks every interaction, second-guesses every feeling, and creates problems through the very process of trying to solve them. Jung called this the tyranny of the thinking function. When thinking becomes your primary way of navigating the world, it begins to colonize areas of life where it doesn't belong. You try to think your way through grief instead of feeling it. You try to analyze your way through love instead of experiencing it. You try to strategize your way through vulnerability instead of embracing it. This tyranny creates what Jung identified as a fundamental split in the personality. On one side, you have the competent, successful, rational persona that the world sees and rewards. On the other side, you have the emotional, vulnerable human shadow that gets pushed deeper underground with each achievement. The wider this split becomes, the more violent the eventual reconciliation. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It grows stronger, more creative, more determined to be acknowledged. And because you're intelligent, your shadow becomes intelligent too. It learns to use your own strengths against you. It speaks your language, knows your weaknesses, and can outmaneuver your conscious defenses with surgical precision. This is why intelligent men often find themselves in situations where they've systematically destroyed something important despite knowing better. The shadow has been planning this destruction for months or years, laying groundwork, creating conditions, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and when it does, it uses your own intelligence as the weapon. Jung observed that this pattern is particularly dangerous because it's self-reinforcing. Each act of self-destruction confirms your worst beliefs about yourself, which creates more shame, which gets pushed into the shadow, which plans more destruction. You become trapped in a cycle where your intelligence serves your own downfall. The most insidious part of this cycle is how it masquerades as strength. Society rewards intelligent men for their ability to compartmentalize, to separate thinking from feeling, to prioritize achievement over emotional well-being. You learn to see your emotional needs as weaknesses to overcome, rather than signals to heed. You develop pride in your ability to function despite inner turmoil, not realizing that this very ability is setting you up for eventual collapse. Jung found that intelligent men often carry a secret belief that they should be able to think their way out of any problem, including psychological ones. When they can't, when their intelligence fails to solve their emotional difficulties, they experience a particular kind of shame that's almost unbearable. This shame becomes fuel for more self-destructive behavior, creating a downward spiral that can last for years or even decades. The tragedy is that the very intelligence that creates these problems also makes them harder to solve. You can read every psychology book, understand every theory, analyze every pattern, and still find yourself repeating the same destructive behaviors. Knowledge without integration is just sophisticated ignorance, and intelligent men are particularly susceptible to this trap. Jung realized that breaking this cycle requires something that intelligent men often resist: surrendering the illusion of control that intelligence provides. You have to accept that some problems can't be thought through, some experiences can't be analyzed, and some aspects of life require you to trust processes that your rational mind can't fully understand or direct. This surrender feels dangerous because intelligence has been your primary survival strategy. It's how you've navigated the world, achieved success, and maintained your sense of identity. The idea of operating without its constant guidance feels like stepping into an abyss. But Jung discovered that this apparent abyss is actually the gateway to integration and wholeness. The path forward requires what Jung called active imagination and shadow work. This involves developing a relationship with the parts of yourself that your intelligence has been trying to control or eliminate. It means learning to dialogue with your emotions rather than analyzing them, to experience your vulnerability rather than strategizing around it, to embrace your humanity rather than transcending it. But here's what makes this work particularly challenging for intelligent men. You have to use your intelligence in service of something greater than itself. You have to become intelligent about the limits of intelligence, analytical about the dangers of overanalysis, strategic about when not to be strategic. So how do you actually break free from these patterns of intelligent self-destruction? Jung's approach was radically different from what most people expect, and it requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own intelligence. First, Jung recognized that the problem isn't intelligence itself, but the inflation that often accompanies it. Intelligent men frequently develop what he called an identification with the thinking function, where they begin to believe that they are their intelligence, rather than understanding that intelligence is simply one tool among many. This identification creates a brittle sense of self that must constantly prove its worth through mental achievements. When your identity is built on being the smartest person in the room, any situation that challenges this identity becomes a threat to your very existence. You start avoiding risks that might reveal limitations, relationships that might expose vulnerabilities, and experiences that might humble your intellectual pride. This avoidance creates a progressively smaller world where your intelligence can maintain its supremacy, but at the cost of genuine growth and connection. Jung discovered that breaking this identification requires what he called the transcendent function, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without needing to resolve them into a single, coherent framework. For intelligent men, this means learning to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, not understanding, not being able to figure everything out. This tolerance for uncertainty is perhaps the most difficult skill for intelligent men to develop because it goes against everything that has made them successful. Your intelligence has trained you to seek clarity, to eliminate ambiguity, to find solutions. But many of life's most important experiences exist in the realm of paradox and mystery, where intellectual solutions not only don't work, but actually make things worse. Consider the paradox of love. The more you try to understand and control love through analysis, the more it slips away. Love requires presence, vulnerability, and surrender, qualities that can't be achieved through thinking. An intelligent man might spend years studying relationship psychology, reading about attachment styles, and analyzing communication patterns, all while remaining fundamentally unavailable to the actual experience of loving and being loved. Jung observed that intelligent men often use their analytical abilities as a defense against the very experiences they claim to want. You study emotions instead of feeling them, analyze relationships instead of participating in them, theorize about meaning instead of creating it. This creates what Jung called a substitute life, where intellectual understanding replaces lived experience. The shadow work that Jung prescribed for intelligent men involves recognizing and integrating these defended against experiences. This doesn't mean abandoning your intelligence, but rather expanding your repertoire of ways to engage with reality. It means developing what Jung called feeling thinking, the ability to let emotional wisdom inform intellectual analysis rather than being dominated by it. One of the most powerful techniques Jung developed for this integration is what he called active imagination. This involves entering into dialogue with the parts of yourself that your rational mind has been trying to control or eliminate. For intelligent men, this often means dialoguing with the part of yourself that feels, that needs, that hurts, that fears, that loves. Imagine sitting across from the version of yourself that makes those destructive decisions. Instead of analyzing why this part of you acts out, you simply ask it what it needs, what it's trying to accomplish, what it's afraid of. You might be surprised by the answers. Often, the destructive behavior is a desperate attempt to meet legitimate needs that your rational mind has been ignoring or dismissing. For example, the workaholic pattern that many intelligent men fall into often masks a deep need for worth and belonging. The rational mind says that working harder will lead to more success, which will lead to more recognition, which will finally provide the sense of value you're seeking. But the shadow knows that this strategy will never work because external achievement can't fill an internal void. When you dialogue with this shadow part, you might discover that what you really need is not more achievement, but more connection, not more recognition, but more authenticity, not more control, but more trust. These needs can't be met through thinking your way to solutions. They require you to show up differently in your relationships, to risk being seen in your imperfection, to value being overdoing. Jung found that intelligent men often resist this kind of shadow work because it feels inefficient compared to the rapid problem-solving they're used to. Emotional integration is slow, messy, and non-linear. It doesn't follow logical progressions or respond to analytical interventions. It requires patience, compassion, and a willingness to be confused and uncertain for extended periods. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. The energy that gets trapped in destructive patterns is the same energy that, when integrated, becomes available for creativity, connection, and genuine contribution. The intensity that drives self-sabotage can be transformed into passion for meaningful work. The perfectionism that creates paralysis can become a commitment to excellence that includes room for human limitation. This transformation happens through what Jung called the union of opposites. Instead of trying to eliminate your destructive tendencies, you learn to understand what they're trying to accomplish and find healthier ways to meet those same needs. Instead of fighting against your shadow, you learn to dance with it, to include it in your decision-making process, to honor its wisdom while setting boundaries around its expression. For intelligent men, this often means learning to value different kinds of intelligence. Emotional intelligence, somatic intelligence, intuitive intelligence, relational intelligence. These forms of knowing operate by different rules than analytical thinking, but they provide essential information for navigating life successfully. Emotional intelligence tells you what matters to you, what energizes you, what drains you, what you need to feel fulfilled. Somatic intelligence communicates through physical sensations, tension patterns, energy levels, and bodily responses. Intuitive intelligence provides insights that leap beyond logical analysis, connecting patterns that rational thinking might miss. Relational intelligence helps you navigate the complex dynamics of human connection. When you learn to integrate these different forms of intelligence with your analytical abilities, something remarkable happens. Your decision-making becomes more nuanced, your relationships become more satisfying, your work becomes more meaningful, and your destructive patterns begin to dissolve naturally. Jung emphasized that this integration isn't a one-time achievement, but an ongoing process. The tendency toward inflation and shadow projection doesn't disappear. It just becomes more conscious and manageable. You learn to recognize the early warning signs of destructive patterns and intervene before they gain momentum. One of the most important skills Jung taught for maintaining this integration is what he called holding the tension. When you feel the urge to act destructively, instead of either suppressing the urge or acting on it, you learn to hold the tension of the conflict. You sit with the discomfort, explore what's driving the urge, and look for creative third options that honor both your rational goals and your emotional needs. This might look like recognizing that your urge to sabotage a relationship comes from fear of intimacy, then finding ways to address that fear directly rather than through destructive behavior. Or recognizing that your tendency to overwork comes from anxiety about worth, then developing practices that cultivate self-value independent of achievement. Jung also discovered that intelligent men often need to develop what he called a relationship with the transcendent. This doesn't necessarily mean religious belief, but rather an acknowledgement that there are forces and patterns in life that are larger than individual understanding or control. This relationship provides a context for your intelligence that prevents it from becoming inflated and destructive. When you recognize that your intelligence is a gift to be used in service of something greater than yourself, it becomes a tool for contribution rather than domination. When you understand that your analytical abilities are part of a larger web of intelligence that includes other people, natural systems, and mysterious forces, you become more humble and more effective. The ultimate goal of Jung's approach isn't to diminish your intelligence, but to liberate it from the burden of having to control everything. When your intelligence is freed from the impossible task of managing all aspects of life, it becomes available for what it does best: solving problems, creating solutions, and contributing to the greater good. As you begin to integrate these different aspects of yourself, you'll notice that the destructive patterns that once seemed inevitable begin to lose their power. The energy that was trapped in self-sabotage becomes available for creative expression. The intensity that drove you toward destruction becomes fuel for meaningful contribution. Remember, your intelligence is not your enemy. It's a powerful tool that has been misused due to lack of integration with other aspects of your psyche. When you learn to use your intelligence in partnership with your emotions, your body, your intuition, and your relationships, it becomes a force for creation rather than destruction. Jung's final insight about intelligent men and self-destruction is perhaps the most hopeful. The very intensity that makes you prone to destructive patterns is also what makes you capable of profound transformation. The same depth that creates complex problems can create elegant solutions. The same sensitivity that leads to self-sabotage can lead to extraordinary creativity and contribution. Your journey toward integration isn't just about stopping destructive behavior. It's about becoming the kind of person who can use all of your gifts, including your intelligence, in service of life rather than in opposition to it. It's about discovering that true strength comes not from the dominance of thinking over feeling, but from the marriage of all your capacities in service of wholeness. Take a moment right now to consider: what would change in your life if your intelligence became an ally to your humanity rather than its opponent? What would you create if all that destructive energy became creative energy? What would you contribute if you stopped fighting yourself and started working with the full spectrum of who you are? According to Jung, that transformation isn't just possible, it's your birthright, waiting for you to claim it.